New tonight, Ukrainian drones struck one of Russia's largest oil refineries overnight. This is the latest in Ukraine's campaign to take out Russia's fuel infrastructure. Joining us now, CNN contributor Jill Doherty. She's also an adjunct professor at Georgetown University and the former CNN Moscow bureau chief. Jill, thanks for being here with us. The Ukrainian president Zelensky telling our Fareed Zakaria that Ukraine is focusing on taking out this infrastructure in an effort to keep Russia from producing more drones and weapons. What do you expect Russia's response to be to this continued effort by Ukraine?
Well, so far they seem to be downplaying it. And I think, there's a reason for that because oil and gas, the energy exports that Russia has, are critical to its budget. I mean, anywhere from, it could be like 45%. Sometimes it even has gone up to 50% of the income that they get from exports comes from energy. So if they are hit, and this was a big oil refinery up in the northwest part of Russia, if they're hit, this really can hurt Russia. So I think, I did look at the Russian response. There's not much of it other than to say that they shot down some of the drones and pieces of the drones fell, created fires, which they put out, and no one was injured. But we really don't know exactly what the response is. And also, Jessica, we know that this has been happening. Ukraine is hitting more and more of these refineries and production facilities, and it is having an effect.
Yeah. And okay, so this is happening. Ukraine going after these refineries where they are producing this oil. At the same time, President Trump is telling the NATO allies, look, I'll put these tougher sanctions on Russia if you promise to stop buying oil. All of you promise to stop buying oil from Russia and impose those sanctions as well. What do you think might happen with that?
Well, I mean, in theory, it should have some effect. But I think one of the problems with that is that it is very complicated, to tell Europe suddenly to switch off all the oil and gas. Now, if you look at what most of Europe has been doing, the NATO allies, EU, they have been switching off. They've been going green and cutting down significantly. I mean, if you look at gas, they've cut from 45% of their gas was coming from Russia about 3 years ago. Now it's down to 19%. And with oil, it's down to 3% coming from Russia. But there are two countries, and I think we ought to note this, countries that the United States and the Trump administration have actually been complimentary of, and that would be Hungary and Slovakia. So if you say, will it be effective? Yes, but it would take a lot of time. And one of the other ways of doing it, getting to the end of whatever the end is, would be to allow the Ukrainians to fight back militarily and to actually be able to take the fight to Russia.
Mm. And then there is the piece involving Poland and what we saw recently. We heard from the Secretary of State yesterday saying that the U.S. is looking into whether those drones were intentionally sent over Poland, and if so, what that might mean. But Jill, this to me seems like it has the potential of being highly inflammatory.
Oh, definitely. And, you just have to look at the Polish response immediately. Well, number one, interestingly, and importantly, they were able to have a response that included a number of members of NATO. And so the response looked as if they did the right thing. And then Poland immediately invokes Article 4, which is the discussion. It's not Article 5, asking for assistance from the other NATO allies, but it's a step down from that. It's quite serious. So I think you have to look at this as a warning sign. Other countries on the border, Romania has had that happen, some others along the border. So the problem with Russia, and I think we have to remember this too, is that Russia sometimes does things that are very unclear, like, was it a mistake? Did they do it on purpose? Where did it come from? So that it doesn't directly trigger NATO to have an Article 5 response, but it's definitely a threat. It's a threat to Europeans who could have been hurt if those drones had been armed. And it's a challenge to the Europeans and to NATO to know how to respond.
Right. And we're looking at a map while you're talking. So while we know all of that, we also know that Russia and then Belarus kicked off these major military drills to test the readiness of their armed forces, kind of this tit for tat situation. What did you read into that?
Well, that is very important. So these Zapad, which means West, Zapad 2025 exercises, Russia has held them for years. And interestingly, the last time that they actually held them was right before the invasion of Ukraine, in the full-scale invasion in 2022. And they held them with Belarus. And that's exactly who they're holding it with right now. So in response, they're smaller this year because they've got a lot of the people fighting in Ukraine. But NATO has rustled up its own response, which is being called Eastern Century. And they say that this is a new answer, a new kind of, I guess you call it new defense design, which includes intelligence, weapons, et cetera. So they are gearing up to make it very clear to Russia that NATO is ready. I think the bottom line from this, Jessica, is that the implications of what's happening in Ukraine are growing. And there doesn't seem to be any indication from Vladimir Putin that he is stepping down. On the contrary, we have a lot more attacks on Ukraine, really, quite vicious, major attacks, killing a lot of civilians. And then you also have these odd attacks, kind of gray zone attacks coming in Poland, et cetera. So it's getting more dangerous, and the Europeans are very worried. And I also would say one last thing is that the Europeans are very worried about the United States and its response. If you look at what Donald Trump said, he said that this is Biden's and Zelensky's war. He never mentioned Putin. And a lot of people, I can tell you, as I was looking at response from Eastern Europeans, a lot of people in Eastern Europe said, Putin's the guy who started it. So, I think it's an increasingly dangerous situation here.
All right. Jill Dougherty, always good to see you. Thank you for that. We appreciate it.